Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Episode 2 of the two-part BBC series, India the Modi Question, was broadcast last night in London, and from early this morning, links have been available for those in India who wish to see it. And as far as I know, those links are still available. They have not been blocked. This second episode is essentially about the treatment of India's Muslims since 2014, when Narendra Modi first became Prime Minister of India. And the message, or at any rate, the message that came home to me, is that India's Muslims have become second-class citizens. Joining me now to talk about this second episode and how he believes the government should respond to it is one of India's foremost journalists, the former editor-in-chief and former publisher of The Hindu, N. Ram. Mr. Ram, as I said, episode 2 of the BBC two-part series, India the Modi Question, was broadcast last night in Britain, and links are available since early this morning for those people in India who wish to see it and can access those links. So let me start with a simple question. As one of India's top journalists, what is your assessment of this second episode?
Karan, this episode 2 is excellently conceived and very well produced. It's got a mix of people in it, arguing both sides, but it is essentially on Narendra Modi and the Muslim question. There is an organic, or there's a genetic connection, as I mentioned earlier, between episode 1 and episode 2, and that links Mr. Narendra Modi with the Muslim question, and it brings it up to the present. There's a genetic connection between 2002 and the present, but going back, there's a genetic connection between 1925, when the RSS, or the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, was formed, and the present, but focusing exclusively on the Muslim question in India. They don't bring in the farmers' revolt, all kinds of other things. So I think it's very clear. There's a focus to the whole thing, and it forms an organic whole, episode 1 and episode 2. And now we know what the message is.
Now, this episode, as I said, and as you agreed, is essentially about the treatment of Muslims since Modi became Prime Minister in 2014. For those who haven't seen it, let me mention, it covers beef lynchings, the exclusion of many Muslims from the National Register of Citizens in Assam, the CAA and the Delhi riots that followed very closely, the abrogation of Article 370 and allegations of torture by the army in Kashmir, and graphic footage of the police vandalizing the Jamia Millia Islamia library and how they effectively killed Faizan by virtually beating him to death. Now, first of all, in terms of its factual content, is this documentary correct or is it exaggerating?
There's nothing exaggerated here, but you'll see right through episode 2, our colleague and friend, Swapan Das Gupta, plays the role of an apologist. He puts it in context. Sometimes he admits that something was wrong, but he puts it in the best possible light, and that's the role of an apologist. That's his right. and I think they've given him plenty of time on episode 2. But what comes out, I think you've highlighted the key things in this episode 2 very ably, and that's what it's all about. But I think it's been done on a factual basis. The footage, some of it is not new, but I think some of it is new. You'll be able to tell us more about that since you watched it very, very closely. I also watched it once. And I think there is some new footage, but the way they've woven together all these things that happen and which speak to the handling of the Muslim question after Mr. Modi came to power, the Modi government came to power. I think that's what it is. It is very well done.
I'll come to the footage and the newness of the footage as well as the newness of some of the victim interviews in a moment's time. But you're confirming, because you are, in a sense, able to best judge this, factually, everything presented in this documentary is correct. It's not an exaggeration.
Yes, it is not at all an exaggeration. Nothing is overstated here. The footage speaks for itself. And some of the comments are very telling. By Nilanjan Mukhopadhyaya, I think that he comes, there's nothing overstated about it, but he puts everything in context. His insights are exceedingly valuable, for the whole narrative. And there are various others, Arundhati Roy, and so on. There's some very interesting comments in this episode 2, even more than there was in episode 1.
Now, this documentary.
Yes.
Sorry, this documentary also has, as you correctly pointed out, some very powerful footage and also heart-rending stories of victims that we did not know before. A lot of the footage is new. Those heart-rending stories are almost unique. For instance, there's the story of Alimuddin Ansari, one of the victims of beef lynching. There's the story of Noor Hussain, his wife and their little children, who spent 18 months in a detention center in Assam because they couldn't prove their citizenship. There's Faizan's story and an interview with his heartbroken mother lamenting her son's death, as well as his friend Wasim's eyewitness account of how both he and Faizan were beaten, Faizan in the process ending up dead. I get the feeling that a lot of this footage, a lot of these victim accounts were available for the Indian media if they wanted to find them. After all, they are from our country. The victims are our fellow citizens, but our media didn't make that effort to find the footage, to put it together, or to contact the victims. That's my feeling. Would you agree?
I fully agree. I think our mainstream media and also the others, the non-mainstream media, failed to do the minimum in this context. Perhaps there was fear that was a deterrent. There was intimidation, or some of them had their own ideas of what should be covered. But it was a significant failure of the Indian news media to, including television channels, to do what was right, to what was required. And so on. So I think that's one of the messages that come out of this film. And I think it's done.
What you're saying is that the BBC has put together the factually correct story of what happened to Indian Muslims over the last 8 years, accompanied by putting together eye-catching visuals and also putting together heart-rending stories. The BBC has done something we should have been the people to do, but we didn't do it. Our media didn't do it. Our news channels didn't do it. The BBC has done it for us.
I fully agree with that, and in a very coherent and intelligent way. You have to make sense of what was happening, sense making, bearing witness, going deep somewhere necessary, investigating, but the making sense function, I think, the BBC has done brilliantly in this episode 2.
Now, something that will stand out is a comment made by the Kashmiri lawyer Habil Iqbal. He provides alleged evidence of army torture in Kashmir, which additionally, he says, the army did in such a way that it was broadcast on a public address system to the whole village. if this story is true, and I'm only being cautious and adding that, if this story is true, I imagine it's going to particularly annoy the government.
Yes, but the army, of course, denies it or would deny it. And when something like that happens, I think there's rarely an independent inquiry within, because everything then goes into the army world, and then people don't know what really happened unless they put out some kind of release later on. So I think it's for the army to really investigate this truthfully and come out with the outcome. And that would be a good thing for the image of the Indian Army, the Indian Armed Forces.
To be fair, the BBC documentary does carry the army's denial as well.
Yes,
it says
yes.
that the army categorically denies any allegations of torture. But let's be honest, armies are the same all over the world, and soldiers do occasionally lapse. We don't like to believe this of the Indian Army. I'm not in any way running them down. But soldiers in that sort of situation, whether in India, Iraq, or anywhere else, do occasionally make lapses, and most generals will accept that lapses can happen. I'm not saying they did, but they can happen, and they need to be investigated. And more importantly, they need to be discussed. Transparency is important, and that's what the BBC has done. We may not like what they've done, but they've brought to the surface something that we as a democracy should acknowledge and discuss. And if it's untrue, then it must be proven to be untrue, not simply asserted because emotionally that's our favorite position.
And note that they played by the rule book. They gave the army a chance. They then put it out that they've denied it completely. So the justice was done, but not put that allegation out. It was the cop out. Would have been a cop out. You heard that story. It sounded credible. You can't be sure. You had to verify it. You checked with the other side. They denied it. You said so. You have no way of investigating yourself what happened in this situation. So I think again they did the right thing and the professional thing.
Now, the second message, and in a sense, this is what I believe is the overall message of this part 2, is that since Narendra Modi came to power in 2014, our Indian Muslims, they are our fellow citizens. They have every right to this country as much as you and me or anyone else, but they have become second-class citizens. That was the message I got from the film. Would you agree with it?
I hope that it's not true. I wouldn't use those words, second-class citizens, because then that's admitting defeat. I would still hope that there are enough resources, socio-political resources in India, moral resources in India, where it is ensured that there are no second-class citizens. All citizens are equal. Of course, it's not true in every respect, but to say that a population of about, what is it now, well over 200 million, if you can consider them a community, of course, they're very diverse. So something in the region of 210 or 215 million at least. For them to be regard themselves or be regarded as second-class citizens would be a completely unacceptable situation for you and me, I think. It would be a great tragedy, and I hope that I wouldn't come to that conclusion yet.
Okay.
But discrimination, anti-Muslim venom, hate, threats to murder, threats to rape Muslim women, all these are about in the marketplace, in the political marketplace. And these fellows, these thugs, those who want to murder and rape, these elements who should be locked up for life, they are still about, and they seem to enjoy immunity, which comes out repeatedly in this episode. Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay makes that point. This is the message they want to send out, that Hindus have special privileges, that it's all right to do it, nothing will happen against you. So I think that happens, but I still wouldn't accept the proposition that Muslims have become a second-class citizen. They are not.
Another message from this documentary, and this time it's one that's conveyed and delivered by the French scholar Christophe Jaffrelet. And I'm going to paraphrase what he says. I don't have his precise quotation. He says, the West doesn't care about the situation in India. He says they're looking to India to balance China, and human rights in India is not on the list anymore. And what he's really saying is that because India is strategically important and a huge economic market, the West is turning a blind eye to the human rights aspects where India is clearly letting down, if not betraying, its constitutional and democratic commitments.
Yes, I think this is entirely true, and it's a good and new point that was brought in by Christophe Jaffrelais. I think that was well incorporated in this episode 2, and I think it's completely true. And you see it not only with reference to India, Western policy towards, say, Saudi Arabia, after the brutal murder, torture and murder of the journalist Khashoggi, and Biden came out with an answer to that, how now against the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I think this is part of their international policy, and it particularly applies to the case of India because of the China factor. They want to use India as a counterweight to China, and I hope there'll be enough sense in India to avoid being used in this way.
But the main point is, as a result of either using India to balance China or because they see India as an economic market they want to enter and invest in, yes, Western concern about the human rights situation in India has diminished to the point where they may be aware of what's happening, but they don't take it up and they certainly don't push back. And that is a point Mr. Jaffrelais made very strongly.
Yes, they pay lip service to human rights in these specific cases. A few people are allowed to speak. Jack Straw, look back to episode 1. He had the whole thing investigated because he was very bothered about it. He felt very close to India. He didn't want to take any drastic steps. So he wanted to find out the truth. And that's the report, which is now available in full, thanks to the Caravan had got access to that full report, which was commissioned by Jack Straw and then the High Commissioner, then High Commissioner, British High Commissioner in India. But most of them wouldn't want to go so deep. So despite their saying the human rights violations, Amnesty International reports and so on, despite all that, they don't. It's mainly lip service paid to either secular and democratic values or human rights in places like India, where other strategic interests override such concerns.
Now, there's a third message, and this time you pick it up with specific reference to the footage and the victim accounts of the Delhi riots of 2020. On the one hand, you have Arundhati Roy saying that visual footage of Faizan being beaten to death by the police made her think, what a disgusting society we are. Those were her precise words. In total contrast to Arundhati Roy, there's Swapan Das Gupta in the film who says, and I'm quoting him, in the larger scheme of things, the Delhi riots were not important. But they were important, he adds, for the media, because it means less work and you can get good media footage at your doorstep. Would you agree that Arundhati Roy seems to represent the view that the riots showed India in its worst light, while Swapan Das Gupta seems to represent the view that it was all a media creation or something that the media would benefit from?
I couldn't make sense of what he said at all, Swapan, because it's completely impenetrable, this comment. Does he mean it didn't happen? Does he mean that, as you said, it was a creation of the media? Then he's living in some unreal world. And this is an Orwellian, statement which George Orwell would have loved to take on or write about, maybe in an essay. So I don't know what on earth comes out of that statement when you say it's a creation of the media, which means it was fiction. Or maybe they exaggerate this. What is the exaggeration in this footage or the comments?
But the important thing is that the BBC carried both Arundhati Roy's comment that what I am seeing points out what a disgusting society we are. And it also carried Swapad Das Gupta's comment, which seems to suggest, at least that's what one makes of it, that this is a media creation. The BBC was honest to carry both. It didn't focus on only one. It didn't take sides. It gave both to the audience and left it to us to judge.
Absolutely, and that's the best. That's the best kind of story, or the best kind of documentary that you can imagine. There's yet another memorable statement that Arundhati Roy makes in this episode 2, but perhaps we'll come to it. It's about refugees.
Absolutely. We're a country which is manufacturing.
I've taken the trouble to transcribe it, and this is what it is. This is not a country that is managing its refugee problems. It is a country that is manufacturing refugees out of its own population. You could even say out of its own citizens, because these people are clearly citizens.
This is why I asked the question. Are we treating Muslims like second-class citizens? Because it's our Muslim citizens, through our treatment, that we're making refugees in their own country.
Yes. Except that so far it has been mainly in Assam. This has happened in Assam, but as they point out in episode 2, they're being very accurate on that. If I remember right, 700,000 Muslims who've been living there for a long time have been made illegal immigrants, but more than 1 million Hindus got caught up in this. So that was a bit of a dilemma. I think that's a nuance they bring out in the episode 2, which I think is important.
We're coming to the end of this interview. I want to quote a sentence of the commentary, which comes almost right at the end of this episode. And here's the sentence. Under Narendra Modi, India has been transformed. He remains enormously popular and hugely divisive. For me, that seemed to sum up the reality of the India we're living in. Would you agree?
Yes, I think that is really true. And I think this narrator who softly states this conclusion, this powerful conclusion, I think that's perfectly done for those who bother about the techniques of documentary making. I think it's perfect. And then that's followed by Christophe Chaprillot's comment on the West and so on. So I think it's just sums it up perfectly. That if I were the documentary maker, I would have probably concluded with. I'm not, but I would have concluded with that line.
Now,
I have yet another thing about the government handling this.
I'll come to that in a moment's time. But how do you first respond to the view that episode 2, because it's about things that are happening contemporaneously, is in a sense more disturbing than episode 1? Because essentially episode 1 is historical. It's about something that happened 21 years ago. Because we're living through what episode 2 describes, and it's happening around us, its impact is greater, it's more disturbing, it's more worrying. Would you agree with that view?
Because some people said, yeah, let it be after the first, all that has happened after episode 1, let it be and let's move on. It was a way of looking at it. We didn't say it. But in this case, we are living right through it. And it's true. In that sense, it's even more disturbing because no answers, there's no light at the end of this. Whereas episode 1, of course, there's also something that was unresolved there, that those who are responsible for it, for what happened in 2002 in Gujarat, have not been held accountable. And there's no statute of limitation on the truth or attempts to find it. But in this case, we are living right through it, and it has a certain, not only contemporaneous quality, but a sense that where people wonder what's going to be the outcome, what's going to be the next. So in that sense, I think it is more disturbing. Yes, but
Absolutely.
together, but they needed to be together. You needed both episodes to really understand the theme that was being explored, which again is the Muslim question and the Modi government's attitude to it. But it goes beyond the Modi government, because there's the whole Parivar, the Sangh Parivar, which spearheaded by the RSS, which is, when they talk about, they don't go into it in any depth, but that's what you see in the footage. these mobs.
Absolutely. And the important point is that the criticism that was made by some people of episode 1, that the BBC is deliberately raking up the past, it's scratching an episode that may be hurtful, but it's old and forgotten. That criticism can't be made of episode 2 in any way, because episode 2 is happening as we live. And dare I say it, for some people, it's getting worse and worse by the day. So this is India of today that BBC is talking about in episode 2, not India of the past.
And every honest person who views it, and I hope that millions of people will see both episodes. It's going to be difficult to see episode 1 unless they remove the blocks. And BBC studios may still put it down for copyright reasons. But I think this has to be viewed by millions of Indians in particular, and including Indians abroad, the people of Indian origin abroad, and whether they will rethink, they will pull back and see what's gone wrong and what kind of international image you're getting as a result of these actions, these ideas and actions. I hope this will prove, in that sense, a positive intervention which allows you to correct yourself and reform. It's not going to be easy. It won't happen necessarily, but I think there's a chance here. Speaking truth to power, if you like, in this way, is a very good contribution by the BBC.
But it's not just speaking truth to power. The BBC is holding up a mirror to the whole of India, and that mirror shows the sort of country we've become. And it's asking us a question, even though it hasn't actually put it in those terms. Do you like the sort of country you've become and seem to be additionally becoming every single day? Because if you don't, this is your chance to say, halt, no more. This is the first time on television, in such a powerful way, has a mirror been held up to us people about the country we're becoming. And therefore, with that as the preamble, I'll come to my last question. How should the government respond to this episode? You and I discussed a few days ago that the response to the first episode ensured that everyone in the country wanted to watch it. The ban the government applied clearly backfired on the government, and worse still, it presented India in a terrible light internationally. It denigrated our commitment to democracy because we were censoring. How then should the government respond to this episode, which is about contemporaneous India?
I hope they have learned from inviting what is known as the Streisand effect. Barbara Streisand in 2003 sued a photographer for 50 million because he was photographing the whole coast, hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of photographs, and a house happened to be in one of those photographs. She sued him. The outcome was, before the lawsuit, 6 people had downloaded this photograph, including 2 of her lawyers. But after that, 400,000 people actually viewed it. There's evidence on it. And after that, it was known as the Streisand effect. In other words, you try to suppress, censor, stop, or divert attention from something, and more people see it as a direct result.
Absolutely. And that is what will be the outcome of episode 1. The government tried to ban, and it's guaranteed by that ban that people want to see it and will find ways of seeing episode 1, which is why I ask, how should they respond to episode 2?
Let it be free. Let people see it and make up their minds for themselves. And it is my understanding, I think it is also your understanding that that they will not block this.
And can I also end by putting this to you? I'm, in a sense, reconfirming what you said, that you believe this is excellently conceived and excellently produced. There's nothing exaggerated. It's factually correct. And it holds up a powerful mirror to India itself, of the country we are becoming. It's a chance for the Indian people to realize this is what we are becoming.
Well said, and I entirely agree with you on this.
Thank you very much indeed, Ram, for this interview. And may I add, for those in the audience who are keen to see episode 2 but haven't had a chance to do so, that here's a little nugget that might whet your appetite further. Donald Trump features in episode 2. The BBC have had a delightful sense of humor and they've left him there. See if you can find him when you watch it. Thank you very much indeed, Ram, for this interview.
Thank you for having me, Karan, again.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on The Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.